Mr. Ahern tells 6-1 News that the money was raised by a group that he described as long-term personal friends, and after he'd refused an earlier offer of a fundraising dinner to clear loans incurred during his separation. The £39,000, equivalent to €50,000, came in 2 tranches, the first being paid in 1993.
They gave me the 22,500 and I said that I would take this as a debt of honour, that I would repay it in full, that I would pay interest on it. I know the tax law, I'm an accountant, and that I would pay that back in full and on another date when I could.
But in the event, he says, neither the money nor the accrued interest has been repaid.
I haven't paid the money because they refused to take it. I think they will now because they see the difficulties we've created, but I offered a number of times to repay it.
Mr. Ahern said the money was used to offset bank loans taken out at what he called a dark, sad time in his life, emotionally describing how his savings had been depleted.
In the separation, I agreed to provide 20,000 for my children to an education account as part of the agreement that I made, and I did that. And I also had to pay off other bills. So the money I'd saved was gone.
But what about the central political issue? How can a serving finance minister accept such donations without being compromised?
The difference of talking about somebody taking millions and somebody taking hundreds of thousands in exchange for contracts and other matters, and taking what is relatively small contributions from friends who had a clear understanding they were paid back. I do not equate those. My advice is I've broken absolutely no codes, ethical, tax, legal or otherwise. Yes, over the last number of years, a number of false allegations, half-truths, lies were made against me to both of the tribunals. There's been so many of them, I won't detail them all, but the main ones were that I took a bribe of £50,000 in a car park in the Burntine Hotel from Starry O'Brien, which was meant to have come from Mona Callan in the All-Ireland final date of 1989. The second one was that I took a bribe from Mona Callan of £30,000 in 1992. That I had bank accounts in the Netherlands, Antilles, Liechtenstein, Jersey, England, that I had 15 million in an offshore account, that I had received 30,000 in a payment of 50,000 from Mona Callan to another politician sometime in 1994, that I had fixed the designation for Golden Island in Athlone for Mona Callan, that I had a bank account in Mauritius, and they produced forged documents to show that I had this bank account. Now, these allegations were made to both tribunals. So the tribunals rightly, under their terms of reference, and had no option, and naturally I was totally obliged as any citizen to produce evidence that these allegations, and there were others too, so I had to give full discovery of all my records, my bank accounts, my wife's bank accounts I had in my children's names, Fianna Fáil bank accounts associated with my constituency. So I had to give them all those records.
And included in that was the records relating to your separation from your wife in 1993?
Yes, I had given, obviously, I had given all of the records that related to it. I hadn't given the court documents, but I'd given all the details of monies that transferred between us and between the children.
And it was the leak of those documents or that information last week that has given rise to the current controversy, and you confirmed that that most of the details in that original Irish Times story were correct.
Yes, I had given all the documents in confidence to the tribunals. Over the years, I've dealt with tribunals for 9 years on all kind of issues, some party and some personal, but these personal ones. I had given all the documents to show that none of these allegations were correct. So my life wasn't being investigated, my marriage wasn't being investigated, what I gave to my children wasn't being investigated. It was, the planning tribunals are about corruption, about people doing wrongdoing and other issues, and I just wanted to clear my name to show that, and it was right that I would have to give all these details, and I did give them.
And the situation now is that some of those details are in the public domain. Are you prepared now this evening to clarify to the Irish people exactly what was involved and what led to this collection on your behalf in 1993?
I am, Brian, because I've obviously taken advice over the last few days. In the normal course of events, any information that I have given or that others have been asked to give were given always with the strict rider that it's all confidential. But the fact that it leaked out, I'm left with no alternative, and my legal advisors have told me that I've asked them they've thought about this for a few days, that's why I've had to wait. They say that I'm entitled to protect myself.
So why was the money raised then for you?
The money was raised by close friends, people who were being close to me for most of my life. They're not political friends, they're personal friends, they're long-standing friends. And in Christmas of 1993, if I can go through, there are two issues here. The first one, on Christmas week 1993, my solicitor, the late Jerry Brennan, who has been a long friend of mine, he had asked friends of mine, unknown to me and unelicited by me, to make a contribution to help me, because he knew what my financial state at the time.
He was aware that there were demands on you, financial demands, as a result of your separation.
Yes, he was my solicitor in my he was my solicitor right through.
And what were the figures involved?
Well, what he raised, should I say, first of all, they offered. They came to me a month earlier. My High Court case, which had been dragged out. I separated in 1987. I've been in the High Court a number of times in 1993, and it concluded in November 1993. Jerry Brennan came to me and he said that they wanted to raise a function for me. 1,000 a head, 25, 30 people. I said no, I wasn't going to do that. It was personal money. If anyone does that, it's for politics, so I refused. So then, unknown to me, they went to personal friends of mine. They're Paddy Riley, Des Richardson, Pádraig O'Connor, Jim Nugent, David McKenna, Fintan Gunn, who's deceased, Mick Collins, Charlie Chalk, all personal friends of mine. And they gave me 22,500 either Christmas Eve or Stevens's Day of 1993. And
that was to settle, at that stage, your legal bills?
It was, they knew, a good few of them knew, that I had taken out a loan with AIB in O'Connell Street to settle my legal bills. I had taken out the loan, so I actually used the loan to settle the bills. I didn't want to take the money. I took it on the agreement. It was Jerry Brennan, Des Richardson. I didn't deal with them all. They gave me the 22,500, and I said that I would take this as a debt of honour, that I would repay it in full, that I would pay interest on it. I know the tax law, I'm an accountant, and that I would pay that back in full on another date when I could.
Now, this amount, this 22,000, was this evenly divided between this group? Did they all contribute more or less the same?
One paid 5,000, everyone else paid 2,500. They had given me that. They were all friends. I was beholden to none of them, or them to me, for many political issues. There were people who were well known to be very close with me. And
this was a loan, and you made it clear to them at that stage that that's the way you regard it?
I would say, I told them very clearly that I wouldn't accept it on any other terms, and that has always been the base of it. And a loan with interest, because I had said, Brian, that I wouldn't be able to pay it back for a time, but that I would pay it, and I would pay with interest. There was no written agreement. There were friends.
So there are no documents then to support this?
There's no, well, other than that, well, there is the documentation that all of these people have now given to the tribunal.
And have you paid interest in the interim?
I haven't paid the money because they refused to take it. I think they will now because they see the difficulties you created. But I offered a number of times to repay it. I offered, and some of them said, take it when I retire from politics. Others said they would put it into my constituency. I refused that and always had taken it that it was a loan that I would pay back.
So as we speak, the loans, none of the money has been repaid and no interest has been paid?
No, but the first understanding still remains that it is a debt of honour. It's a debt that I pay the interest for, and they all accept that. They all
Was that the extent of the money that was raised at that time?
That was the extent of the money that was raised at that time. There were other people. Who, can I say, last week the impression, just for correctness' sake, the impression was given that this was 4 people and that had raised between 50 and £100,000. As you can see, that was not the case, and the person who was deemed to have paid most of this actually paid £2,500. There were others that wanted to assist at the time, and later on in 1994, 4 of them gave me £16,500. They would have contributed at Christmas, but they were friends of mine, and they were Joe Burke, Dermot Carew, Barry English, and Paddy Riley, who was a different Paddy Riley. He's known to my friends as Paddy Riley the Plaster. He wouldn't be known publicly. But
so the total figure now at this stage then is 38,000.
38,000.
And again, was that in the form of a gift, or was that as you understood?
No, that was clearly a loan. It was on the same basis. And again, our long-standing friends. It was unsolicited. These people are friends of mine. People like Joe Burke was my neighbour, 35 years ago. And they gave it on that basis. So all of this information I gave. The first one obviously came out from somewhere. The second one hasn't come out, but they were the 2 amounts of money.
And again, just to be clear, the second 16,000, again, that's a loan, but no interest has been paid, and none of that money has been repaid.
That money has not been.
And you regard that as a debt which you
It's
a
debt of honour that I have to discharge, and I made this point. To be honest, and I would not have been probably able to pay it till about 1999 or 2000, but a number of times since. To Dermot Carew, who was the one who organised, again unsolicited by me, the second amount. They understand, and I think all of them would say they were loans.
And is that the extent of the payments?
That's the extent of the payments, Ryan. I just want to make another few points.
Just to be clear, there were no subsequent payments in connection with these matters of separation or anything else in the period since then? No. Can I just make two other points I think are important? I was not impoverished while I was going through the separation. It was a very dark period for me, a very sad period for me, and I had taken out a loan like anyone else would, but colleagues knew what the situation was. From 1987, when I separated from Miriam until the end of 1993 was a long protracted period, as happens in family law cases, and delayed for one reason or another. Miriam was operating. I had no account in my own name in that period. Miriam had the joint accounts, and I paid Miriam maintenance, but also saved money during that period. And I'd saved quite a substantial amount of money, because it was from the time I was Lord Mayor in '86, I'd saved at the order of £50,000. The trouble was that in the separation, I agreed to provide 20,000 for my children to an education account. Was part of the agreement that I made. Don't like having to give these details to my children, but for completeness, and I did that. And I also had to pay off other bills. So the money I'd saved was gone. So my friends knew that. I'd no house was gone, so they decided to try and help me. And that explains the 38,000, but that's the figure that we're talking about.
That's what it was. The only other thing, Brian, totally separate, nothing to do with this, but I don't want anyone saying I didn't give the full picture. I did a function in Manchester with a business organisation. There's nothing really to do with politics, whatever. I was talking about the Irish economy. I was explaining about Irish economy matters. And I'd say there was about 25 people at that. And the organisers of it, I spent about 4 hours with them, dinner, I did question and answers. And all the time from 1977 up to current periods, I got 8,000 on that, which, whether it was a political donation.
This was a regular event?
I had actually done the event a number of times, but I only once got a contribution. So I think on all of the times in my personal accounts, and we've gone through them and I've given my personal account, that is the only other payment. It's nothing to do with this, but it was a payment that would be in my accounts, and I did give that to the tribunal as well.
At the time of this 38,000 that was raised for you in late 1993 and into 1994, you were Minister for Finance. Perhaps the second most senior political position in the country. Did you have any qualms about taking this money from these individuals, given the position that you occupied?
Well, I think probably every Crams, they wanted to run a function, I wouldn't let them. They wanted to give me the money and I refused. But they were long-standing, close political and personal friends of mine, and mainly personal friends. And on the basis that I would pay back the money, it wasn't big money either, quite frankly, and that they were under that understanding. Now, I had difficulty paying it back afterwards. Like the impression would be given, some of them are very wealthy. I mean, some of them might be. Some of them were probably wealthier then than they are now, quite frankly.
But some of them were people in business.
Yes.
They had business interests. They were in a position potentially to benefit from decisions that you would make as Minister for Finance.
Well, you know, all I can say in that, they didn't, and never did they ask me. They were not people that ever tried to get me to do something. I might have appointed someone, but I appointed them because they were friends. Not because of anything they had given me. And you know, I think they appreciate that these were debts of honour. They gave them to me. I suppose in hindsight back, I wasn't to know then that I would be Taoiseach, that I would more money, that my daughters would be far more self-sufficient than I ever would. I didn't know these things. And you know, so whether I should talk to them or not, but I always seen them as loans. I didn't see them as any risk other than friends at a time of need, when they knew I was in difficulties, when they knew that where I was staying was and how I was living was a source of conversation.
Can I put you on the other hand, what Mr. Justice Bryan McCracken had to say just a couple of years later,
yes,
in 1997, and something which you said you concurred. And he said that it is quite unacceptable that a member of Dáil Éireann, and in particular a cabinet minister, should be supported in his personal lifestyle by gifts made to him personally. And this is what you had to say in response to that. You said that Mr. Justice McCracken stresses, and I quote Bertie Ahern here, stresses a point I have repeatedly emphasised, that public representatives must not be under a personal financial obligation to anyone. Now, at the very least, there's an appearance there that you're under a personal financial obligation to this group.
Well, I don't accept that, Brian, one bit. The difference of talking about somebody taking millions and somebody taking hundreds of thousands in exchange for contracts and other matters, and taking what is relatively small contributions from friends who had a clear understanding they were paid back. I do not equate those. If I was to have to take several £100,000 or several million from people where I had no association with, or people that were totally distant in business interest, that would be totally wrong. Perhaps you could say in politics nobody should ever take anything from anyone. Perhaps that.
Well, you'd have to declare it now if you're operating under the current legislation.
And I wouldn't have had a difficulty, quite frankly, declaring it. I have broken no law. I've broken no ethical code. I've broken no tax law. I've always paid my income tax. I paid capital gains tax, but I never had much in my life to pay. And I paid my gift tax. So I broke no ethical code. And if I had to have returned on these things, I wouldn't have had a difficulty. I did point out to my friends a number of times that it was better that I clear these, and you know, they would sometimes laugh it off, but they all accept and have accepted that these are loans will pay and will pay.
But there's a suggestion, for example, today that the Standards in Public Office Commission might be looking at this because of the benefit you got from having so far anyway, the interest waived on that, and that's something that could be retrospective to the legislation.
Well, that's not my advice. I was well aware of the legislation. I've long checked these things back by eminent tax people, and I've looked at the legislation closely. My advice is that is not the case.
But we're not talking here just about any tax liabilities. We're talking about your requirements under the ethics legislation.
I've checked that, and I repeat, my advice is I've broken absolutely no codes, ethical, tax, legal or otherwise, and I've checked that to the best of my ability. And these were close friends. They were not big business interests that were removed from me. There were people that I saw, if not on a weekly basis, on a very regular basis. Most of them would be known to be very close to me.
And yet people watching this, Taoiseach, perhaps people who've gone through a separation themselves, and they'll appreciate just how difficult and painful that can be, will say that the financial consequences of that is something that they've had to deal with themselves, perhaps had to go to the bank, borrow the money and repay the interest. And you were in a position where you were able to have a whip round organised on your behalf to meet your debts.
Well, you know, I've been involved many times in my life in whip rounds for friends. and for people close to me. And I value friendships, and I've done it for constituents. I've done it for people who've been in need. And I think people understand that. People say, you know, all that has happened since, you were wise to do that in 1993, but it didn't happen since. What I did was 1993. And, you know, I have given all of my records, I've given all of my accounts, I probably, this is right that I should give it. There's no privileged position being in Taoiseach or anything else. But as far as, I was not, I don't want this, Brian, to be an investigation into an investigation by a tribunal into corruption. There was no corruption in this. There was no favours sought, no favours given. There was no cosy contracts given to me or to any members of my family for business interests.
But there is also the important question here of the appearance of being above reproach. And that's really the issue here, isn't it, Taoiseach? That you've created circumstances in which that can be called into question.
Well, I wouldn't like to think that. I wouldn't like to think that any member of society or anybody else who takes at a time of need a loan and would pay interest on it, that is not beyond reproach. I wouldn't like to have the stigma that because a group of a dozen of my friends, when they saw my life being one thing and go to another, and it's not for me to plead how bad life was then, but I mean it was clearly obvious to those who cared about me and those who were with me. I had to pay my legal fees, which I did take a loan out. They helped me to clear it out quicker, and then I had to go through all. But I did it at that particular time. I didn't continue it. I didn't do it again. I didn't, do anything that it was untoward in any way. And I wouldn't like. And people would say, based on all that has happened in the McCracken Tribunal and the Mahon Tribunal, but that hadn't happened in 1993, 1994.
Right. Are you prepared to go into the Dáil and make a further statement and to answer questions?
If people want me to do that, lead us questions on every day, and I answer things every day. I quite frankly, I'm not sure what I have to answer. I've looked at all of the issues of this. And I think my friends would realise that if they had have accepted back the money when I'd offered it, it would have been easier for me now. But they thought they were being helpful to me. And I had other loans. And, when I'm in a good position as Taoiseach now. My daughters are doing well, so I don't have a difficulty. And my mortgage is well advanced now, but I did the thing as everybody else did.
It's just that 38,000 today perhaps mightn't be a terribly significant amount of money, but back then it was a very substantial amount of money. It would have bought you a house here in the city of Dublin. It was a sizable contribution.
I bought my house a few years later, and I can tell you it was a long way nearer 200,000 than 38,000. It is what it is, Brian. I'm not going to say it is. I'm clarifying what the position is. I mean, I gave confidentially all my information. People said I got 50 to 100,000. Any other money was my own money. Obviously, lodgements after my separation was over. Money that I'd saved, I put back into my accounts. I don't know where the figures come from. I think people perhaps are looking at my own money that I had saved when I put it back into. I didn't have account in my own name during my separation years. I opened an account after the separation court was over, and I put back in my own money and then paid out my bills. So perhaps that's where people are adding it up. But the impression that I got between 50 and 100,000, and maybe far more from just a few people, wasn't correct. I've given you precisely how I got the money from close friends, people who cared about me. Perhaps I should have just got a bigger loan, would have been able to pay. And let's be honest, I was teaching within a few years later, it would have killed me one way or the other, and I paid them back the interest. So I really don't think I did anything wrong in any way.
Do you think this has been damaging politically? Has it damaged particularly in the run-up to the election, your capacity to lead Fianna Fáil into the general election?
Well, I mean, that's another issue that I don't want to go into. But I mean, this was designed. I think people would examine my accounts. I mean, I looked at my accounts since '77. I've given you the only three things. There might be a few small ones but I tried to match up every single issue back for 29 years in politics and in my constituency since 1982. I probably have as good as records as there is. And luckily, because people close to me kept very good invoices and records, I was able to give this data. But it leaked last week by whoever, by the way. I've been tried to accuse that I was pointing the finger, but by whoever. It was a leak which had nothing to do with the tribunal. It had nothing to do with planning, building, zoning, or anything else. And it was done to damage me. And I suppose those people who set out in a calculated way to do that, whoever they were, probably have succeeded to some extent.
There has been some damage. Does that come from perhaps the way it was handled? That initially you confirmed some of the details, and then you said it was none of anybody's business what money you got, and now you're giving this interview.
Well, the point is, I think if I was legally advised, what I would have said the first morning, the whole lot is nobody anybody's business, it's the tribunal, and I'd say no more about it ever. But when you're teaching the country, that's unsustainable. And it is ridiculous that where I've gone for the last week, that there's been, 50 journalists running around behind me, like Pied Pipers. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I said to my legal people, I cannot sustain keeping things that are no secret. I gave this information. This wasn't dreamt up. Nobody sneaked into my safe and found it. I gave this information to the tribunal. It shouldn't have been leaked. I don't know who leaked it. I'm not blaming anyone who leaked it. I don't want to be taking anyone's character. But somebody took mine and in a very cynical way leaked it out. But it's best that I just give the true facts. And, from the position of the Irish public, they've always been kind to me about being separated. They've always been understanding. And if I cause offence to anyone, I think I have to a few people. I'm sorry too.
Taoiseach, thank you for talking.